I'm currently writing a book on fictional responses to the genocide. I'm looking particularly at novels by African writers and even more particularly Rwandan writers, and trying to work out how they're dealing with the genocide, how they're commemorating the genocide and what they're actually writing about. So I went to Rwanda for the 20th anniversary, Kwibuka 20, to compare how the genocide is officially commemorated and to look at the differences between these official commemorations, the big ceremonies, and fictional commemorations in novels and short stories.
So this was your first trip to the country?
It was, yeah.
And whilst there you you attended the official memorial ceremony for the genocide anniversary. What was that experience like?
It was a profoundly moving experience. I went to the Kwibuka 20, the large commemoration in the football stadium, at Amahoro Stadium. But it was also a very difficult experience. As a British woman, I felt a bit like an intruder. We were put with the VIPs, kept away from the majority of the population in Rwanda who were there to remember their own very personal experiences. And I think feeling like an intruder was exacerbated by the fact that many of the people in the audience were experiencing post-traumatic flashbacks, and so were screaming quite loudly and being carried out by therapists. They're taken off to trauma rooms where they can recover. So it was very humbling, very moving, but very troubling. And I have to say, I also ended up feeling very guilty. And one of the important themes of the commemoration in Rwanda was, quite rightly, the international failure to intervene and the fact that the United Nations failed to recognise the genocide as a genocide until it was much too late. And as somebody who represents a country that was part of the United Nations Permanent Security Council, I did feel very implicated in that and very guilty. So I think it's very important that I was there, but it was not an easy thing to experience.
How much of a sense did you get whilst you were there of what life is like for people living in Rwanda who lived through the genocide 20 years ago and are still living in the country today?
You don't get an awful lot of sense of that because people tend not to talk about their experiences. For obvious reasons. I think people don't want to be constantly remembering. But at this particular time when I was there, of course, it was very much on everybody's minds. So there was a bit of a tension, I think, between the government's need to move on and rebuild the country, which it's doing very successfully, but at the same time recognise what happened, acknowledge it and remember it, and also people's own personal needs to get on with their lives, but at the same time not to forget what happened. So it's not something that people really talk about every day.
And yet in the work you're doing at the University of Nottingham, it's looking at ways that people are talking about these experiences, perhaps in other ways, through writing.
Yeah, what's interesting is most of the novels that I'm looking at are not written by Rwandans who were actually in Rwanda in 1994. Most of them were in exile, so they were watching it on television as I did. Or they're Africans who are not actually from Rwanda at all, but who went back and visited Rwanda after the genocide and wrote about it. So there are very few. I've so far only discovered 2 novelists who are actually Rwandan who were there at the time of the genocide, which is interesting in itself. I think Rwandan people, when they do write, the first thing they write are testimonies and sort of witness accounts, and fiction will probably come much later. So it's beginning to appear now, but it's going to take a bit of time, I think, for people to feel ready to write imagined works rather than personal accounts of their own experiences.
What was the highlight of your trip?
There were so many. I mean, it was a completely amazing experience, but I think the highlight was probably the commemoration in the stadium, but at the same time it was a very difficult experience. But to be there and be part of it and to watch, there was a very beautiful spectacle that was performed about the genocide was profoundly moving, as I said, but it was also very difficult. So it's difficult to talk about it as a highlight, really. It was a complex experience and quite an ambivalent one for me.
And one that I'm sure will stay in your mind for quite some time.
Oh, absolutely. I don't think I'll forget it, and I think that's good too. I think we should all remember all the time and not just in April each year or even every 10 years or 20 years. I think, we all are responsible for what happened. We all failed to act. We all looked the other way, and we do need to remember. So, yes, I don't think I'll ever forget it.